Hi everyone, my name is Benjamin Nowak, and in today's video I'm going to share with you a pattern that nobody talks about for spring bass fishing. This is going to help you locate bass more quickly and follow them around your bodies of water. Now if you guys also have a trip planned to Lake St. Clair, you guys aren't going to want to skip this video. There's going to be some nuggets in here that are going to help you catch more bass on Lake St. Clair this spring. Speaking of St. Clair, I have a trip planned in 2 weeks, April 28th through the 30th, and if you guys are looking for a place to stay, I'm going to leave a link down in my description below that's going to take you to a website where you guys can book this beautiful house. It's right on Anchor Bay, 2 minutes from Fairhaven, 7 minutes from Selfridge, and I believe 15 or 20 minutes from Harley, which are the 3 main ramps. So if you guys are looking for a place to stay, go click the link in the description. It will take you to the website and check this beautiful house out. It's right on the water and it's phenomenal. That's where I'm going to be staying in a couple of weeks. Now as we dive into this video, the main pattern that I'm going to share with you guys is sort of the reverse of what most people talk about, myself included. We're not going to talk about starting deep and follow those fish from their wintering holes. We're going to go the reverse. We're going to talk about fishing the inside out and what this means and how this can help you locate and stay ahead of bass. A lot of times one of the biggest mistakes we make as fishermen is we start deep and we beat our heads in only to realize these fish were in a little bit shallower water than we expected, and you start to say to yourself, man, why didn't I just go shallow to start? So what fishing inside out means is starting shallow and working your way deep. This is something that I've started to perfect or started to understand more of over the past couple of seasons that helped me be more successful and follow bass more consistently throughout the spring. In the springtime, these fish are moving very, very quickly. They move in really fast, they move out quickly, and I tend to always be behind the best pattern. So by starting on the inside out, you can stay ahead of these fish, stay ahead of their movements, and follow them around your lakes much more easily. The key driver of their fish from these wintering holes to these shallow water areas is to get up and spawn, but if you can figure out where they're going to be located, where they're going to be spawning, you can start there and work your way back towards the deep. There's a couple main reasons that I'm going to use this inside out strategy. Not only does it keep me ahead of these fish, and what I mean by that, it helps you identify kind of where these fish are at before they actually get there. You get the first wave of fish to maybe push into the back of the creek, but you also can identify shallow water cover much more easily. So it's easier to get up shallow, and pick apart pieces of shallow water cover than it is to float around in the middle of the lake and hope you land on a needle in a haystack. It's also easier to pattern these fish around your body of water when you're fishing shallow cover than it is deep. When you're deep, you typically have to use your electronics and graph around and find very key pieces of structure and cover underwater. But when you're fishing shallow, you can typically identify these pieces of cover or specific structural elements such as points or docks or pieces of wood with your eyes and with your basic navionics or mapping tools. So it's a lot easier to identify how to pattern these fish when you're targeting them in shallower water. But one of the other main reasons that I like to start shallow and work my way deep is I can start to identify key regions of the lake that I need to focus on, or regions of a creek or a pocket that I need to focus on, and I can pattern that across the lake. Here's a perfect example of this. A couple seasons ago, I was targeting these fish in early spring, 43, 44 degree water temperatures. I started in the back of the creek, and this is the way I'm going to do this, is start in the back of the creek and work my way out, fishing everything, fishing all secondary points, all the docks, all pieces of grass, every piece of cover and structure I'm going to try and target as quickly as I possibly can. I'm not necessarily trying to catch every fish out of that location, but I'm trying to at least hit it with relative confidence that if there was a bass there, he would have bit. I was fishing a lake called Secord, and I started in the back of this creek, and I was working my way out. And one of the keys I started to notice as I was working my way out of this creek was that these bass tended to be located on the docks closer towards the main lake, in the first third of the creek. So I'd fish basically halfway out of the creek, and then I would start to get some bites as I was hitting those docks and those pieces of wood closer towards the main lake. As I did this in the first creek, I then went to the second creek and fished my way from the middle of that creek out instead of all the way to the back. And then I got the same bites, and I started to realize that this was a pattern. These fish wanted to be on that deeper water closer towards the main lake, but they had to be on some piece of wooden or hard cover. Then I could take this pattern and I could run around the lake. I could look at my Google Maps and say, okay, there's some wood here, there's some wood here, here's another creek that I can fish with some docks in it, and I could run this pattern pretty much across the lake. I'm going to include a link to this video down in the description for you guys to check out if you guys want to dive into this pattern a little more, but if I hadn't fished my way out of this creek, I might have missed this pattern, and I might have missed where these fish were at. One of the other great things about this is I had located where these fish tended to be in the first third of the creek. So the next trip out, I could say, okay, they were in the first third, the water temp's gone up 4 degrees, maybe move back to the secondary points, and I could really stay in front of these fish because I started to understand what they were doing and why they had been there. So by using this pattern, not only can you stay ahead of the fish, but it's really easy to pattern around your bodies of water when you figure out where these fish are located. As we start to talk about Lake St. Clair, one of the key indicators of where these fish are located is specifically the depth that these bass are in. So as you talk to people that fish Lake St. Clair a lot, they'll give you the depth that they're finding their bass, whether that's 9 to 12, 8 to 10. They'll give you a depth range of where they're catching most of their fish. And typically with this information, especially in the spring, you can locate little sections of the lake that these bass are going to be keying in on. One of the main sections of the lake is called the mile roads. And one of the keys for me is figuring out what depth that these bass are in. So last year is a perfect example of this. We started in about 3 foot of water and worked our way out. And what we started to notice is we were getting a lot more bites in that 4 to 6 foot range than we were in the deeper sections of the lake where most of the people were. But one of the biggest keys, especially when you're trying to target a specific depth, is locating or understanding the nuances of why those fish were there. The fish that we were targeting tended to be holding on specific pieces of rock and wood in that shallower water that was warming up faster. We had just gotten a big cold front. The water temps on most of the main lake had dropped into the low 40s, but we found a section of water where it was upper 40 degrees, low 50s, and these fish were holding on pieces of rock and wood in that shallow water. So by understanding that 4 to 6 depth range, we can now cover water to locate and identify more areas where there was wood and rock present. This allowed us to pattern this across the lake. It wasn't just on the mile roads, and we were able to have a ton of success. So by understanding depth range, by understanding these shallow water to deep water patterns, you can start to break down your lakes more quickly and stay ahead of the fish to follow them throughout the pre-spawn. Now this is something that I've replicated time and time again. There's going to be a group of fish that start to show up in shallower water more quickly than we expect it. So by using this inside-out approach, you can be a lot more effective and efficient on the water. I'd be really interested to hear your stories about where you started shallow and were able to catch these fish before you thought they should be there. I'll give you one more example of this. I went out fishing last week and the water temps had risen about 15 degrees from the week prior because it got really, really warm. Well, I didn't really think anything of it, but I started fishing mid-depth throwing a jerkbait, and I noticed there was some wood laying in the water about 50 feet in front of me. It was only at about 2.5 foot. Well, I don't know what made me do it, but I picked up a jig and went up shallow, and I flipped into this piece of wood, and it was my first or second flip, and I got bit from a fish. And this told me that I should have been fishing shallower a lot earlier. Now, by this point, my night was pretty much over, but I had recognized that these fish were a lot shallower than I had expected them to be. And had I just started shallow and worked my way out to the depths, as I'm telling you guys in this video, it would have helped me identify this pattern not only a lot more quickly, but maybe unlock a little bit more to that pattern that would help me catch bigger fish. So do me a favor, if you guys enjoyed this video, click this link right here. It's going to take you to another patterning bass style video like this one. If you guys haven't already, hit that subscribe button and go check out the link to that house in my description below. If you guys are looking for a place to stay on Lake St. Clair, this is the best place to do it. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, take care, tight lines, God bless, pursue your passion.